The river was loud that night. Loud enough to swallow screams. It wasn't the kind of river you think of in postcards. It wasn't bright. It wasn't clean. It was a winter river, dark water rolling under a sky that felt too low, too heavy, too indifferent. The current moved like it had purpose. Like it knew exactly where it was going and didn't care who got in the way. She stood on the bank, barefoot on cold stone, her toes numb, her breath thin in the air. Her coat hung open like she had forgotten to close it, or like she wanted the cold to punish her for even being there. Behind her, her mother stood quietly. No one else was around. No headlights. No neighbors calling from porches. No dogs barking. Just the river and the wind and a silence that felt carefully placed. One push, no hesitation. No anger, no shouting that people later could point to and say, "That was the moment it turned." Just silence. And when the body disappeared beneath the water, she didn't scream. She didn't run. She didn't drop to her knees and call the name that had once meant home. She turned around and walked away. This is not a story about rage. This is a story about a daughter who believed distance could replace responsibility and thought one quiet night could erase a lifetime. Her name was Emily Carter, 29, white, American. The kind of woman who looked put together even when she was tired, hair pulled back, clean nails, a calm face trained to show nothing unless she wanted it to. For years, she had been telling herself she was doing the right thing. She sent money, every month, on time. It wasn't charity, she told herself. It was responsibility, a duty, a clean receipt, a transaction that proved she hadn't abandoned anyone. When you send money, you don't have to sit with anyone's disappointment. When you send money, you don't have to hear the pauses. You don't have to see what time does to a person when you aren't there to soften it. In the city, Emily's life looked like progress. A small apartment on the third floor of a building that smelled like fresh paint and hallway disinfectant. Neutral walls, a neat couch that didn't sag, a fridge that hummed quietly instead of rattling and groaning like something old and stubborn. Outside her window, she had traffic constant, impatient lights blinking, people moving like they had deadlines that mattered, billboards, bus stops, coffee shops open late. She liked the city because it moved fast enough to drown out guilt. Emily worked long hours at a logistics firm near the interstate. Her job wasn't glamorous, but it sounded respectable. Shipments, schedules, inventory, tracking numbers that moved across screens like proof that something somewhere was always getting handled. She wore pressed blouses and shoes that pinched her toes. She learned the language of soon and later, and I'm in a meeting, until it sounded like truth. And still every month she sent the money. Not too much, not too little. Just enough to make the numbers feel moral. Enough to convince herself she was a good daughter. Back home, her mother never asked for more. Her mother's name was Margaret Carter, 62, white, American. The kind of woman who could fold a fitted sheet properly. The kind of woman who kept rubber bands in a drawer, just in case. The kind of woman who had spent an entire life being useful until usefulness became her identity. Margaret lived in a small town that people passed through but rarely stopped in. A town with one diner where the coffee tasted like old metal and the waitress called everyone "hun." A town with a grocery store that closed early and a gas station that always had one pump out of order. A town where people waved even if they didn't like you, because not waving was considered rude and rudeness was remembered longer than kindness. Margaret's house sat a little outside town, not quite countryside, not quite neighborhood. It was older than Emily's excuses. The roof leaked in heavy rain. The front door stuck when winter swelled the wood. The yard grew wild the moment no one looked. But Margaret kept it tidy anyway, as if cleanliness could argue with decline. When the phone rang in the city, Emily would feel the tightness arrive before the sound even finished vibrating. Mom. Sometimes she answered quickly. Sometimes she stared at the screen like it was a threat. First ring she would pause. Second ring she would inhale. Third ring she would whisper, "Not now." And then she would let it ring longer than she should have, because going back meant more than buying a ticket. Going back meant walking into small rooms that had never been big enough for her dreams. It meant stepping into a kitchen that smelled like old coffee, dish soap, and years of things left unsaid. It meant seeing the woman who once seemed permanent now moving slower, pausing mid-step like the floor might betray her. It meant seeing what she had left behind, an old house, an old woman, a past Emily didn't want to carry. Emily told herself she was busy, that the city demanded everything from her, that she couldn't lose the job, couldn't lose the rent, couldn't lose the fragile life she had built with sleepless nights and swallowed pride. But deep down, she knew the real reason. In the city, she could be the daughter who sent money. In her hometown, she would be the daughter who didn't come. And there was no transfer receipt that could hide that. When she finally picked up, her voice always turned careful soft in a way she didn't use anywhere else. "Hi, Mom." Margaret's voice would come through thin but warm, like an old radio turned down low. "Hey, honey," she'd say. "I was just checking in, making sure you're okay." There was never accusation, never drama, never the sharp edge people expected from mothers who had been left to age alone. Margaret didn't complain when the money came late, didn't count it out loud, didn't list the things she needed. She didn't even ask Emily when she was coming home, because asking would mean admitting she wanted it. Margaret had learned how quickly pride can starve. So she talked about small things instead. The neighbor's new fence, the weather turning too early, a sale at the grocery store, a funny story about a dog that kept getting loose. And Emily would laugh at the right places and look around her clean apartment, like laughter could protect her. Sometimes the calls lasted 2 minutes. Other nights, Margaret stayed on the line longer, quiet between words, as if she was listening for something in her daughter's breathing. Then she would say the same sentence every time. Simple, gentle, final, "As long as I can hear your voice." "I'm fine." And Emily would swallow because she understood what that sentence was really doing. It wasn't comfort. It was mercy. It was Margaret taking her own loneliness and folding it into something small enough to fit inside a phone call. It was the kind of love that doesn't demand, because it knows demand can push people farther away. And Emily, standing in her bright city kitchen, holding a phone that cost more than her mother's monthly groceries, would nod like she agreed. She would whisper, "Yeah, Mom, I'm fine too." But fine is a word people use when they don't want to beg. The town knew the truth before the daughter did. Small towns always do. They notice the pauses before the cough, the way someone rests a hand on the counter before standing, the way grocery bags suddenly look heavier than they used to, the way laughter becomes shorter, thinner, practiced. Margaret was slowing down. Not in the dramatic way people talk about illness. There was no single day where she collapsed or cried out for help. No sirens, no ambulance. No moment that forced the world to pay attention. Her body simply began to take its time with everything, as if it no longer trusted the world to move at a safe speed. Her hands trembled when she cooked. At first it was small, just a shake when she held the spoon too long over the pot. A splash of oil where it shouldn't be, salt falling heavier than intended. She laughed it off, wiped her hands on a dish towel, and said, "Guess I'm getting old." But the shaking stayed. Her steps grew shorter. The distance from the bedroom to the kitchen became something she measured with care. She no longer lifted her feet high. She slid them gently, like the ground might disappear if she startled it. Her days grew quieter. Margaret used to wake before sunrise, make coffee, and watch morning light crawl across the yard. Now she rose later, sat longer, let the morning stretch around her like an old blanket she wasn't ready to fold. And every morning after tying her sweater and putting on her shoes, Margaret walked to the river, slowly. The river ran just beyond the trees, past a narrow path the town never properly maintained. The walk used to take 10 minutes. Now it took as long as it took. Margaret didn't go there to swim. She didn't go there to pray. She went there to sit. The river did not ask her to hurry. It did not expect her to explain herself. It did not look disappointed when she paused halfway down the path to catch her breath. Water moved at its own pace, sometimes fast, sometimes slow. And Margaret liked that. It never apologized for either. She would sit on a flat rock near the bank, fold her hands in her lap, and watch the surface ripple. The sound filled spaces where conversation used to be. People noticed. They saw her walking alone now. Saw the way she leaned more heavily on her cane. Saw how she lingered longer by the river than anyone else. They asked questions gently at first. "How's Emily doing? Have you heard from your girl? When's she coming to visit?" Margaret smiled. It was a practiced smile. One she had learned over years of answering questions she didn't have the strength to fight. "She's busy building her future," Margaret said. She said it with pride, because pride was easier than truth. People nodded. Some sighed sympathetically. Others looked away, embarrassed by the silence that followed. Everyone understood what that sentence meant, even if no one said it out loud. A future often costs someone else their present. What Margaret did not say was that nights were harder. Pain felt louder when no one was watching. During the day she could manage. Neighbors passed by. Cars drove by. Life made enough noise to distract her from her own body. But at night, the town quieted. The refrigerator clicked. The wind pushed through old window frames. The house creaked like it remembered every winter. Her joints burned in ways that had no names. The bed felt too big for one small body. Every turn reminded her that strength, once lost, does not announce its departure. Sometimes she woke and reached for her phone before remembering the time. Too late to call. Too early to pretend she was fine. So she would lie there staring at the ceiling, listening to her own breathing like it belonged to someone else. On some nights, Margaret stood at the front door, wrapped in an old coat, barefoot in her slippers, standing too long, staring down the road that led out of town. It was the same road Emily had taken years ago, carrying a suitcase and a heart full of promises. Margaret imagined headlights, an engine slowing, a car door opening, footsteps that knew exactly where to stop. She imagined Emily calling, "Mom." She imagined holding her daughter's face and scolding her for coming without notice. She imagined everything. The road stayed dark. No headlights broke the night. No engine hum disturbed the silence. The wind passed instead, cool and indifferent, brushing past her legs like it had places to go. After a while, Margaret would turn back inside, bolt the door, sit on the edge of her bed and wait for sleep to return, if it felt kind enough. In the morning, she would wake again, make coffee, tie her sweater, and walk to the river. Because waiting, she had learned, was something you could survive, as long as you learned how to do it quietly. And then Emily came back, without warning. No phone call to announce the trip. No message asking if it was a good time. No gifts wrapped in apology or duty. Just her arrival sudden, sharp, inconvenient. The bus dropped her at the edge of town just after noon. Winter's sun pressed down on the road like it had something to prove. Emily stepped off carrying a small suitcase and an even smaller patience. Her shoes collected dust immediately. She frowned as if the ground had done it on purpose. Nothing had changed. That was the problem. The house was still there, crouched low and stubborn, its paint peeling like it was tired of pretending. The porch railing leaned slightly, the mailbox tilted. The house smelled old. Not dirty, just lived in. Coffee, old wood, time. The walls felt smaller than Emily remembered. Or maybe she had grown used to bigger ones. They closed in on her the moment she stepped inside, as if the years she had spent away had shrunk the space in retaliation. She could hear every sound her body made, the drag of her suitcase, the shift of her weight, her own breathing. Margaret saw her from the doorway. For a moment, she didn't move. Her eyes widened first, then softened, as if they were trying to catch up with the truth standing in front of her. "Oh," she whispered. And then, louder, like she was afraid the moment might disappear if she didn't name it. "My girl." Margaret crossed the room faster than her body liked and pulled Emily into her arms. The hug was tight but careful, the kind given by someone who knew pain too well to be careless with it. Margaret cried, not loud cries, not the kind meant to be heard by neighbors. These were relieved cries, quiet ones, the kind that slipped out before pride could stop them. Emily stood stiff at first, then allowed the embrace. She patted her mother's back once awkwardly, like someone comforting a stranger. Emily told herself she hadn't come back for this. But relief doesn't erase resentment. That night, the house held both of them like it didn't know what to do. They ate together, sitting across from each other at the small kitchen table. The food tasted the same as it always had, and that irritated Emily more than she expected. She wanted evidence that time had passed, proof that her leaving had meant something. Instead, it felt like the town had paused and waited for her return before continuing. The argument started softly. It always does. Emily mentioned the money, how much she had sent, how often, how expensive the city was, how she couldn't just drop everything whenever she felt guilty. Margaret listened, nodded, didn't interrupt. Then she spoke about prices going up, about her legs hurting more these days, about the way the grocery bags felt heavier, about how neighbors helped when they could, but neighbors had their own lives. Responsibility hung between them like smoke. Then Margaret asked the question Emily had been dreading without admitting it. "So," Margaret said carefully, "how long are you staying?" The room went quiet. Emily bristled. "I just got here." "I know," Margaret said quickly. "I was only asking." But the question had already landed. It felt like expectation, like roots reaching for Emily's ankles, like the town itself was trying to pull her back in. They went to bed without resolving anything. Sleep came late. Emily lay awake listening to the house creak, staring at a ceiling she used to stare at as a teenager, dreaming of leaving. Now she was back, and the anger she had buried under years of distance rose like something thirsty. The next morning, Margaret suggested they walk to the river. It sounded harmless enough. The sun was gentler early in the day, and the path was familiar. Emily agreed mostly because saying no would have required explanation. They walked side by side, at first, then Margaret's steps slowed. Her breath shortened. Her hand hovered near Emily's arm, uncertain, then finally rested there light but insistent. Emily felt the weight immediately. It annoyed her more than it should have. They moved at Margaret's pace now, not Emily's, each step measured, each pause longer than the last. The path that once took minutes stretched into something heavier, something demanding. The river appeared ahead, wide and patient, moving like it had all the time in the world. Margaret smiled when she saw it, the way people smile at something that has never disappointed them. They reached the flat rock near the bank and stopped. Margaret leaned more fully on Emily's arm now. Her grip tightened, just a little. And Emily, watching her mother's slow breath, her careful stance, her body doing its best to hold itself upright, felt something inside her harden. Not rage, something colder. A thought arrived, perfectly calm. If she's gone, I can finally be free. The words settled in Emily's mind without resistance. Free from the calls, free from the guilt, free from the small town that felt like a trap, free from the house, from the waiting, from the future that threatened to look exactly like her mother's present. Emily stared at the water. It moved without asking permission. And for the first time in years, the future felt close enough to touch. There was no fight, no shouting, no raised voices tearing through the cold air. No dramatic moment anyone could later point to and say, that was when everything broke. It happened quietly. So quietly that if someone had been standing far enough away, they might have mistaken it for nothing at all. The river was swollen from recent rain, its surface calm, almost polite, but beneath it pulled with a strength that didn't announce itself. Margaret stood near the edge, her feet planted carefully on damp ground. She leaned forward slightly, peering at the current like it was an old friend she trusted more than her own balance. Emily stood just behind her, close enough to feel her mother's back rise and fall with each breath, close enough to smell the faint laundry detergent on her sweater, close enough to reach out either way. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then Margaret's foot slid. Not a dramatic fall, just a small misstep, the kind anyone could make. Her body tilted forward. Instinct reached for something solid. Her hand shot out, fingers spread, searching for grip. She reached for air. Her nails cut through it, grasping at emptiness. Her other foot tried to follow, but the ground betrayed her, slick and unforgiving. And then she felt hands on her back, strong hands, steady hands. Hands she had once held when they were small and sticky and afraid of the dark. Familiar hands. For half a second, Margaret thought it was help. Her body leaned into the touch, trusting it the way a body does when it has no reason not to. Then the pressure changed, not a shove born of anger, not a violent thrust, just enough. Enough to remove balance, enough to make falling inevitable. The river did not hesitate. The moment Margaret's body broke the surface, the water took her without argument. It wrapped around her legs, pulled at her clothes, dragged her forward as if it had been waiting its turn. Her head went under once, came back up. Her mouth opened, but the sound never made it out the way she expected. The river swallowed it thick and loud and final. She flailed, arms cutting at the water, frantic but weak. Age had stolen the strength she might have needed. The current pulled harder, faster, uncaring. On the bank, Emily stood still. She watched. Seconds passed. 1, 2, 3. Time stretched strangely. Each moment heavy and precise. Long enough to change her mind. Long enough to step forward. Long enough to call out. Long enough to become someone else. Emily did none of it. Margaret's eyes surfaced one last time. They searched not wildly, not accusingly, but with confusion, as if she were trying to understand why the help she had felt had disappeared. Then the river closed over her head. The water smoothed itself out again. Ripples spread and faded like the memory of a stone tossed and forgotten. Emily stayed where she was. She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't fall to her knees. She stood there long enough to be sure. Long enough to know there would be no sudden resurfacing. No miracle pulled back from the depths. When the river gave her nothing back, Emily exhaled. Slowly, she looked down at her hands. They were steady. She wiped them on her coat once on each side, brushing away dirt that wasn't really there. She straightened her clothes, smoothed a crease, as if order could protect her. Then she turned away from the water. The path back to town waited. Narrow, familiar. She stepped onto it without looking back and walked away. She told people her mother slipped. She said it calmly, simply, as if repeating something that had already happened 100 times in her head. The bank was muddy, she explained. She lost her footing. The river was dangerous. Everyone in town knew that. They had grown up with its moods. They had seen it take deer, tree limbs, sometimes even men who believed strength was enough. An older woman falling into it was not a mystery. It was misfortune. Tragic but believable. No one questioned it. They shook their heads. They sighed. They spoke softly about fate and God and timing. Someone mentioned how Margaret had been slowing down lately. Another said she always worried about that river. The story settled easily into place like soil over a grave. Emily handled everything quickly. There were papers to sign, arrangements, calls, a funeral home brochure placed on the kitchen table like a cruel joke. Neighbors brought casseroles and awkward sympathy. Emily thanked them politely, efficiently, as if moving fast could keep something else from catching up. She sold the house. Not immediately, but soon enough. Too many memories clung to the walls. Too many quiet corners that felt like eyes. The money from the sale felt lighter than it should have, but Emily told herself that was just grief doing strange things to numbers. She packed what mattered, left the rest behind. Then she returned to the city, Her life moved forward. That's what people said. That's what she repeated when asked how she was coping. Work filled her days again. Emails, meetings, deadlines that piled up until the week disappeared. She rented a slightly larger apartment, bought new furniture, changed her routine. From the outside, it looked like resilience, but silence has weight. At night, when the city quieted just enough for her thoughts to surface, Emily heard water. Not loudly, softly, in the shower when it ran too long and steam closed in. The sound would shift, deepen, and suddenly she was standing by the river again, watching ripples smooth themselves out. In the sink, when she washed her hands, the way water curled around her fingers made her chest tighten. She scrubbed harder than necessary, as if something invisible clung to her skin. In her dreams, those were the worst. The river always appeared calm there, deceptively gentle. Emily stood on the bank calling out, but her voice never reached the water. Sometimes she was the one in the river, sinking slowly, watching the surface move farther away. Other times she stood frozen, unable to move her legs, unable to turn her head, forced to watch the same moment repeat. She woke with her heart racing, sheets damp, the echo of rushing water still ringing in her ears. During the day, Emily avoided mirrors. At first she didn't notice she was doing it. She brushed her teeth without looking up, passed reflective windows without glancing sideways, adjusted her clothes by feel alone. Then one morning, half asleep, she caught her reflection by accident. The bathroom light flickered. The mirror clouded slightly with steam. And there just behind her shoulder stood a shape she knew too well. An older woman. Pale skin, thin face, wrapped in a faded coat. Her eyes were wide with something between confusion and trust. Margaret, her arms extended forward. Not accusing, not angry, still reaching. Emily spun around, heart pounding. The room was empty. The mirror showed only her own reflection, now wide-eyed, shaking, alone. She pressed her palms against the sink until the trembling eased. After that, she was careful. She kept lights on at night, slept with the television murmuring softly, loud enough to drown out the sound of water in her head. She told herself grief did strange things to people. That time would smooth it all out. But sometimes, when the apartment was quiet and she moved too slowly past a reflective surface, she still felt it. That presence, that unfinished motion. Her mother, standing just behind her, still reaching. Years later, Emily stood by another river. This one ran through the city, concrete-lined, streetlights, guardrails. A river designed to look safe. Cars passed nearby. People jogged in expensive shoes. Couples walked dogs like nothing in the world could break. It was a civilized river. A river that pretended it could not hurt anyone. But it sounded the same low rush, the same steady pull. The same endless movement toward somewhere Emily could not see. Emily was older now. Her face carried lines she hadn't noticed forming. Her hair was pulled back neatly, streaked with gray she no longer bothered to hide. She had built the life she wanted. A better job, a quieter apartment, a routine that didn't ask questions. From the outside, she looked like a woman who had survived. She leaned against the railing and listened. And for the first time in years, she cried. Not the restrained tears she had mastered in private. Not the silent kind she wiped away quickly. These came heavy, uncontrolled. They surprised her. She wasn't thinking about her mother's smile, or her voice on the phone, or the old house. She wasn't missing her. What broke her open was something else entirely. A thought that arrived fully formed, without mercy. No one had ever pushed her mother, except herself. Not fate, not the river. Not age, not weakness, not bad luck. Her. She gripped the railing harder as the truth settled into her bones. All the years she had spent rearranging the story, softening it, burying it under busyness and distance, collapsed under the weight of that single realization. She had not been trapped. She had not been forced. She had not been helpless. She had chosen. The river below continued, indifferent to her confession. It had carried many things away in its time. Regret was not new to it. Emily pressed her forehead against the cold metal and closed her eyes. She thought of all the apologies she had practiced in her head over the years. The ones she imagined saying aloud if somehow impossibly her mother were standing beside her now. I was tired. I was afraid. I didn't know what to do. They sounded small now. Thin, useless. Some truths arrive too late to be forgiven. Some realizations come only after there is no one left to hear them. Emily straightened slowly, wiping her face with her sleeve. The city moved on around her. People passed without looking. Life continued, as it always does. The river kept flowing. And Emily understood, finally, what she had been running from all along. There are some truths no apology can undo. Some people think distance can replace love. They believe that sending money, making promises, staying away long enough will soften the weight of absence. That miles can do the work the heart refuses to do. For many, distance feels safer than facing what love demands: time, patience, and the courage to stay. Others believe silence is harmless. They tell themselves that saying nothing avoids conflict, that quiet choices leave no scars, that if no words are spoken and no scenes are made, no damage is done. In families like theirs, bound by duty and unspoken rules, silence is often mistaken for respect, but silence doesn't forgive. It remembers every moment help was withheld, every time love stood close enough to act and chose not to. Silence becomes a witness that never forgets what it saw, and rivers never forget. They carry what is given to them: truth, regret, and the weight of unfinished love, moving forward without judgment, without pause, long after the voices that failed have gone quiet.